Welcome to our fourth APSCC webinar, China Commercial Space, Reaching a Turning Point. I'm Greg Daffner, based in Hong Kong and CEO of GapSat Interim Satellite Solutions. I'm also president of the Asia Pacific Satellite Communications Council, which is the Asian Space and Satellite Industry Association. We're a nonprofit members organization, so if you're not already a member, please join us. Our annual conference had been planned for November this year in Manila, but because of the likely COVID pandemic travel restrictions, we're expecting that we'll not be able to hold an in-person event this year. So instead, we decided to do an online conference. But to avoid the burnout from doing 3 days of continuous online sessions, we will be conducting short format, compelling webinar sessions starting on Tuesday, August 18th at 9 a.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time. The conference webinars will run for about an hour each, and they'll be weekly on Tuesdays until mid-November. As a warm-up to our conference webinar series, today we're doing a webinar focused on China's commercial space industry. Today's panelists represent privately owned companies, including China's best funded, purely commercial launch vehicle manufacturer, LandSpace, its most advanced commercial Earth observation constellation operator, Charming Globe, and one of the most advanced commercial satellite manufacturers in China, Commsat. Space in China is evolving rapidly, and with recent government initiatives encouraging satellite internet, Earth observation, and other space activities to be done in a more commercial fashion, this evolution is just beginning. Our moderator today to discuss the Chinese commercial space industry in 2020 is Blaine Curcio. Blaine is a consultant at Euroconsult, where he specializes in SATCOM strategy, financial due diligence, satellite projects across Asia, and of course, a focus on China. He is also founder of Orbital Gateway Consulting, a Hong Kong-based firm focusing on commercial space opportunities between China and the rest of the world. So, just to remind you, our next webinar session will kick off our 3-month-long weekly conference series starting on Tuesday, August 18th, at 9 a.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time. See you then. And now, take it away, Blaine. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg, for the introduction. And thank you all for coming to the 4th E-Series APSCC webinar on the Chinese commercial space industry, reaching a turning point. I'm Blaine Curcio from Euroconsult, and I'm joined today by 3 of the most exceptional commercial space companies in China today. During the course of today's webinar, we are going to be showing a number of charts and figures and other facts about the Chinese space industry as a way of showing some context. Most of these facts and figures have been taken from Euroconsult's China Space Industry Report. It is a report that is a deep dive across all major verticals in the Chinese space industry, including launch, satellite manufacturing, SATCOM, Earth observation, and TT&C. It brings clarity to the most opaque space industry in the world, and it is the most current report on the subject, having been published in June of 2020. For more information on the report, you can go to www.euroconsult-ec.com. And again, you will be seeing some charts and figures from this report throughout the webinar today. I will now give an introduction to our panelists on the webinar today. So we have Dr. Dong Lu from Commsat, Dr. Xing from CGSTL, the Charming Globe Satellite Technology Company Limited, also known as Changguang. We have Mr. Kevin Xu Yawei from LandSpace Technologies, and myself, Blaine Curcio from Euroconsult. Now, before we dig into the meat of this webinar, for the purposes of some of our audience members who may not be so familiar with the Chinese space industry and with some of the companies, I would like to give each panelist an opportunity to give a couple of minute introduction about themselves, their company, and what they would like our audience members to know about about themselves and their company in the introductory remarks. So we can go first with Donglu from Commsat, being the first on this slide. So Donglu, would you like to give a short introduction of Commsat and of what you're doing in the Chinese space industry today?
Thank you, Blaine. I hope everybody hear me well. My name is Donglu. I had taken about 7 years in Europe to finish my master degree and doctoral degree in remote sensing. But after back to China, I decided to work with CASC as a consultant for international collaboration and international marketing research. And in 2018, I joined Commsat, which is one of the first new space companies in China, focusing on SATCOM manufacture and operation and user terminal manufacture. As a new space company, Commsat has raised up from ground zero to about 200 employees now, and I assume we are one of the biggest company, new space company in China. And also, thanks to the policy openness in the government part, we managed to raise the attention from the venture capital. So we managed to raise 5 to 6 rounds of finance, to raise about 500 million yuan RMB from the market. In terms of the business, we managed to launch 8 satellites, and one of the satellites is about 100 kilos grade, which is one of the first new space company to launch such type of satellites in China. So thank you for letting us for this conversation, and we hope to share more information later. Thank you, Blaine.
Thank you very much, Donglu. That was a very interesting summary of Commsat. So now turning it over to Xing, if you could tell us a little bit about CGSTL and what you're doing, that would be great.
Hello, everyone. My name is Xing. I'm the Vice President and the Chief Engineer of CGSTL Changguang satellite. Firstly, I want to explain our company's name, Changguang. In Chinese, Chang means the city we located, Changchun, in Jilin Province, Northeast China, and Guang is for optics. Our company is originated from CIMP, an institute of CIS, Chinese Academy of Sciences, which is very famous in optics. I get my doctoral degree in this institute, majored in optical engineering. The core team of CGSTL are mainly from this institute. We started our research on satellites very early, from 2006, and then established the company in 2014. Our main business includes satellite developing, operation, and value-added services. Now we have nearly 500 employees. Among them, more than 85% have master or doctor's degree. CGSTL is also a graduate student education unit of CIS. More than 30 students have accomplished their research and get the master or doctor's degree here. Our prospect is to serve the society using timely Earth-observing information. Now there are 16 Jilin-1 series satellites totally in orbit. Most of them have sub-meter resolution. It has already been the Chinese biggest high-resolution satellite constellation and also growing very fast. Until the end of this year, we will launch 12 more satellites. In the next few years, our plan is to accomplish phase 1 construction of Jilin-1 constellation. That means the number of satellites in orbit will be around 60, and then the temporal resolution of the constellation will be much enhanced. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very helpful and very impressive development path so far. So thank you. So turning it over to Kevin. Kevin Xu, would you like to give us a brief introduction of LandSpace and of yourself, if you'd like, and what would you like the audience members to know about your company?
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kevin Xu, and you can also call me Yawei. That is actually my Chinese name. I'm from LandSpace, and LandSpace is a commercial launcher company, and it's a Chinese private commercial launcher company, which was, let's say, benefiting from the policy from the government, from the Chinese government, that allowing the commercial and also the social capital entering into the aerospace community. So LandSpace is right now dedicated in the liquid launcher, and more specifically, that is a Metalox launcher. We developed the engines based on the Metalox technology on our own, and also based on the series of the Metalox engines, and we are developing the very first medium-scale commercial private launcher in China. And after, let's say, when it's launched, and then I guess it will be the Chinese first Metalox launcher. And also for myself, I am the director of marketing here in LandSpace. So I'm dealing with all of the business development and also the marketing affairs in LandSpace. So that's all for me and for LandSpace. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with the introductions, I think we're good to go, and I hope that the the audience members have a better overview of who our panelists are and what we're going to be talking about. Moving on to slide 4, we have from my aforementioned Euroconsult China Industry Report, we have some very high-level figures that give some understanding of the past 5 or 6 years in Chinese space and kind of what we've been seeing happening. So I'll give just a couple of brief figures, and then we can talk about the industry more generally. So first figure, more than 125 funding rounds having been completed by Chinese commercial space companies since 2014. These funding rounds have raised a total of almost $2 billion US, so 13 billion Chinese yuan. Looking at the industrial base, we in our Euroconsult study, we find that by the end of this year, we expect about 250 small sats to be produced annually by CASC and CASIC at their 2 large industrial bases that are being finalized now. We've also seen 14, or at least 14 commercial launch companies enter the market in China, more than 100 commercial space companies founded since 2014. And this has all led to 319 Chinese manufactured satellites launched between 2014 and 2019. So we have seen just a lot of fast growth, a lot of new investments, a lot of new companies. It's been a very interesting time, and it seems like every week or every couple of weeks, there's some major news update or some company doing something significant. So certainly a lot going on. So my first question for the panelists, and it's a timely question. The biggest trend of 2020 probably around the world has been coronavirus. And this is something that I've been in China or in Hong Kong for most of this period. And from my own perspective, I saw a period of shutdown in China after the Chinese New Year, and that caused everything to stop. And since then, we've seen things coming back online and getting back to normal. And this is very different from what I'm seeing in some other parts of the world. So it would be interesting to hear your perspective on how has coronavirus impacted your company in 2020, and how do you see it impacting your company moving forward? So we can start with Xing. You're underneath my video screen on my computer, so we can start with you, and then Lu, and then Kevin Chu, and yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. I would say COVID-19 has influenced all industries. For us, our company deals with manufacturing and information services. So there are a lot of specific business that require people to travel. So in general, the impact is mostly on travel. Since there are still a lot of projects that require face-to-face communications of details, also, our supply chain has been somewhat affected by the slow transportation of goods. And in general, the progress of many projects has been delayed, I would say, 2 or 3 months at least. The epidemic is force majeure. Everything might be delayed. So the good thing is for us and our contractors or our suppliers will understand each other in most cases. And this year, for generally speaking, development and launch of satellites, of course, is certainly behind the schedule. However, for us, except for developing and launching the satellites, a big part of our business is space information services, which has been almost untouched because people need information at all times. As long as the internet is there, we can deliver the products normally. And for all space industry in China, I feel that, of course, many projects are delayed because engineers working at home for a long time. But now this situation is much better. It's basically been restored. The impact of the epidemic is temporary. I think even if the epidemic won't disappear very soon, I believe the space industry can adapt to the new normal and soon return to the previous state. That's my opinion.
Okay, thank you. And Donglu, would you like to, any thoughts?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Blaine. Yeah, the COVID is definitely the biggest trend nowadays in China and in the whole world. From my personal perspective, actually my hometown is Wuhan, and I'm working in Beijing. So I definitely have been affected a lot by the COVID-19. But for the company, I think the space industry is generally has limited impact from the COVID-19 because of the philosophy, or not because of the fundamental of the business, or because of the current stage of our business. But in the long term, I think the COVID-19 has a very, very strong impact to the macro environment. For example, for the people, the lifestyle changed. So they, for example, many things they used have been turned into online, and the telecom will be much more used. And for the investor, they care more about cash flow for the startups. That's how the company like us, which is more like R&D driven, facing difficult time in this case. And also for many mature companies like big tech or other big companies, they are trying to drive. From my observation, they are trying to change or diverse their business into a more technology-driven economy to be more, how do you say, less fragile or more resilient to the disease. So I think in the long term, we are all facing a different environment from different industry. Thank you, Blake.
Thank you. Some very, very good points. Kevin, anything from you? Any thoughts?
From my point of view, I guess it's apart from all of these impact from the other two participants, from Dr. Zhong and also from Dr. Dong, from the view of LandSpace, we think that it was also impacting, let's say, the manufacture of our engines and the launcher, because one of our engine facility is located in the South City, which is near to Hangzhou, the capital city of Zhejiang province. At the initial stage of the epidemic, not only let's say from the point of view of the design, but also for its manufacture, we have a facility for the hot fire run for the Metalox engine we developed on our own. And at the initial stage, it was, let's say, called into a halt. Let's say it was suspended by the regulations. So the engine development was more or less also impacted by the COVID-19, let's say. From another angle, let's say, not only the manufacturer, but also for the business development, which that is I am in charge of, we can also see many, let's say, challenges. For example, especially the international market development. Right now, you know that almost all of the government worldwide, they have launched some regulations or some limits of the international traveling, and many countries they still, let's say, banned the international travels and the border entry for let's say, non-essential reasons. So one of them is, let's say, like business exchange. So right now, for all of the international marketing affairs, we can only make it online via emails and also telecoms, like what we are doing right now. So all of the face-to-face exchange were, let's say, they've already been suspended. You know, quite a lot of business meeting could be conducted online, but there are still something, let's say, it's quite difficult for us to make it online. So I guess it will last for some time in the near future. Anyway, that's the main aspects we can let's say we can see at this stage.
So it sounds like in the short term there is some challenges and some significant, you know, adjustments that need to be made to the way that these companies are working, but that maybe longer term, because of the increase in need for connectivity and the increased importance of, you know, internet and potentially you know, moving more stuff into space, it could actually help the industry in the longer term. But again, we have some short-term challenges. So changing gears a little bit here. So one of the other facts that we see on this slide is that there have been a lot of companies set up in China in the last 5-6 years, more than 100. And there's only 5 or 6 or 7 different sectors. And so if we have more than 100, that means a lot of these sectors, there's maybe 10 companies or more. So a lot of competition, a lot of venture capitalist money going into these different, you know, competitors. So it would just looking at your part of the industry, what is your company's differentiator? What is it that, you know, if there are many different rocket companies, you know, we can start with Kevin. Kevin, what is the differentiator for LandSpace that you think will allow you to win the market for launch in China?
Okay, thanks for your question, Blaine. So let me intimate a little bit of LandSpace. What is, let's say, what makes LandSpace unique from let's say in the Chinese private launcher companies among all of these Chinese private launcher companies. So right now, LandSpace is actually something really through breaking, that is the first, let's say, the medium scale launchers and also up to large scale launchers that is under development in the Chinese private launcher community. That is to say, in the near future, once the debut flight of ZQ2, that is the name of our first model of the methodological liquid launcher, medium scale launcher, and after its debut flight, Juche 2, and then we will be able, let's say, to open up an era for the Chinese private launcher companies. That is, we can say, allowing all of the commercial space community to access to the space more, let's say, easier, faster, and cheaper. Generally speaking, that is the general idea. And what's more, I guess after its launch, and then I guess we will be the very first one who can provide, let's say, the large-scale payload deployment, orbital deployment from the Chinese commercial, private commercial launch operators. And that is to say, right now, most of the Chinese private launcher companies are providing the launch services to small and micro satellites, small-scale satellites, but let's say LandSpace is doing right now would be the Chinese unique launch operators who can provide the medium or large-scale payloads like a satellite up to 110 or even bigger into orbit. And in the near future, we will also start the development of another launcher model based on the basic version of ZQ2, and that one will be named into we right now it's a temporary name. Let's say it's called ZQ2H, but anyway, that will allow us the Chinese commercial space community to access to the batch access, space access for the satellites constellations. So that is to say, if you would like to launch a satellite constellation into the orbit at one time, and then that is also possible from us. So just in this, let's say, in this context, and especially in the trend of the low Earth orbit satellite constellation development, LandSpace could be able to provide the space access for the satellite constellations, especially the constellation orbital deployment. So that's the idea, which makes us different from other private Chinese private launcher companies.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So I will now turn it over to Donglu and then to Xing to tell us about what is it that makes your company different among all the other competitors in your sector. So Donglu, if you would like to tell us about Commsat's differentiator.
Yep. Maybe you can justify or from our company name, Commsat. So our business works on Satcom actually. And this is one of our key business area, or the sole business area currently in China. And for the uniqueness, I would like to say two parts. One is we are as a new space company, which we regard as more adaptive, or let's say resilient to the environment change, macro environment change, or industry environment change, or policy change, etc. And also we are more commercial driven to make ourselves enough cash flow to support the sustainable development of the company. The second point I would like to say is we are relatively more international and with interdisciplinary employees and also intercultural. I refer to International Space University, a long slogan that's philosophy of the I3, that international, interdisciplinary, and intercultural. So for every year we have employee from Europe, also the internship from European countries, to working in our company as to support our business, and we are welcome all these type of collaborator to come to join us to feel how the China's new space working. That's for my points. Thank you.
Thank you. And Zhong, if you would like to tell us a little bit about what is it that is Changguang CGSTL's differentiator in the sector? What makes you what helps you to compete against the competition?
Yes, thank you. I think there are two aspects. One is our all-industry chain commercial mode of remote sensing satellites, and the other one is our satellite developing technology using payload-centered design philosophy. Firstly, in the traditional space industry, the manufacture and the operation of satellites are separated, and even the manufacture of different subsystems is in different institutes or companies. However, we define satellites completely around the data services, and developing and operating them or by ourselves, which is quite different. Secondly, traditional satellite development usually uses a series of universal platforms. Sometimes the payload has to be modified to adapt the payload platform. But our R&D process is very different. It was just like developing an optical instrument. First of all is to determine the user's demand, then to consider how to make an optical payload. The last one is to make a satellite based on the payload. That's because we did a lot of deep research on payload, and then the payload-centered satellite design philosophy was promoted. This philosophy makes us have a better understanding about why and how we design a remote sensing satellite. Actually, this payload-centered design is not easy. It means highly integrated of complex systems, which bring more technical challenges than traditional designs. And we have been working on this for more than a decade now. Therefore, we feel that these experiences are also the greatest wealth of our company. Meanwhile, at present, our cost control ability has also been very excellent because many components have been developed in-house, especially the most expensive part, optical payload. We start satellite manufacturing from optical elements polishing, so our satellite's cost performance can be very good. And in terms of the satellites that have been launched so far, although our resolution is not the highest and our number is not the highest compared with international satellite companies, we believe it is very competitive that our optical payload developing capability with all satellite manufacturers, which is an important advantage we think is critical in commercial satellite manufacturing. For example, the KF-01 satellite launched in this January is the widest sub-meter satellite with a resolution of 0.75 meter and a width of 136 kilometers, which was a very difficult target, but we have achieved it and provided very good quality images in orbit. And we currently have abundant types of satellite data. In addition to the traditional push broom images, we also have wideband multispectral images, night light images, video, and other images. We are the only company in the world to provide sub-meter night light data, which has been used by many researchers, and many papers have been published by them. So I think these are what make us special. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for those great answers. I appreciate it. And we will move on to slide 5 to talk a little bit about the fundraising in the Chinese space industry over the last 6 years. And as we see in this chart, we've seen fundraising go from very little as recently as 2014 to almost 5 billion RMB in 2019. 2020, we have seen a decline, but still quite a strong year compared to, say, 2016 even. And one of the trends that we have seen is that more of the funding is coming from private sources, so mostly venture capital firms, but also some other private funding sources. So how do you see the funding environment in China today, and how do you see it evolving moving forward? And just to give one example before we go over to the panelists. So I was speaking with someone else earlier today who was mentioning that in China in maybe 2015, 2016, there were not so many space companies. And so the space companies that were there, it was somewhat easier to raise money because there were fewer companies. So if you were an investor who wanted to invest in space and there were like 10 companies, you could pick one of these 10. Now there's maybe 150. And so there's more companies fighting over the money. Now, I don't know if that's true, but some friend of mine mentioned that this morning. So I guess we can start with Donglu. Do you have any thoughts on the funding environment today? How has it changed, and how do you see it changing moving forward?
Thank you, Blake. Fundraising is always challenging, not only in China, I guess. But in terms of our observation, I believe from 2015 to now, we see a trend. The trend is that there are more, in terms of the amount of investment institute, there are more institutes get attention to this market first, but then second, they get more deeper understanding of the market. So, for example, in 2015, nobody even know what is space industry. They get confused with space and aerospace, satellite and plane, things like that. And for three, there are more prestigious investment institutes are joining this game. So this is good trend. But on the other hand, as in many industries, we see massive impact, which means the top players will continue to attract majority of the funding, although the total funding will increase. But I believe many small or let's say less performance companies are facing difficult time, especially in this economic situation. Thank you.
That makes sense. Thank you. Kevin, do you have any thoughts on the fundraising situation?
Okay, thank you. So generally speaking, I guess more or less Donglu has already covered the general, let's say, situation of the fundraising environment in China for the Chinese commercial space community. I would like to add on a little bit about this year's fundraising, and maybe it's like kind of a training prediction of the of fundraising within this year. First of all, I really would like to. I'm sorry, I have to be proud of the Chinese fundraising environment in general. I mean, not only for Chinese commercial space, because under the impact of COVID-19, almost it's already a global issue of the, let's say, of the economic depression right now globally. But right now in China, still we let's say just thanks to the treasure accumulation during the past years, and also let's say the enthusiasm of the fundraising, the investors, let's say, in the PE and also in VC communities, and we are still we can foresee still some quite let's say quite good and beneficial environment within this year, because China has just launched let's say it's a kind of policy or prediction of the future infrastructure constructions. So one of them is the satellite internet, or more specifically, we can call it, it's like the satellite constellations, which will be connected with each other. And I mean the satellites in the constellations with some inter-satellite links, and which can provide the communications and some other information connection scenarios. So that is already right now attributed to the next generations of the infrastructure construction nationwide in China. So right now we can foresee that there will be still some, I mean, although we are facing quite, let's say, challenging environment for fundraising, we still can foresee some benefits for the Chinese private or commercial space community for fundraising. So from my angle, in spite of these challenges, I'm still quite positive, and let's say in this fundraising market for Chinese commercial space. That's my point of view, Blaine.
Yep, no, that makes sense, and certainly since the National Development and Reform Commission, the NDRC, since their ruling, which I guess was about maybe 3 months ago, we've seen a lot more interest. Yeah, a lot of big companies, a lot of small companies, a lot of medium-sized companies, all doing satellite internet-related things. So I think you're right that we've seen a big increase, but we may still see some growth from interest from VCs and from private equity.
True.
So
hopefully, let's say.
Yes, yeah. So Zhongxing, do you have any perspective on fundraising right now for CGSTL or just more generally the fundraising environment in the Chinese space industry right now?
Okay, for us, because our company have enough seed money at the beginning, so we did not carry out much financing and in the past years. So I didn't met many investors. But one of my feeling is that there are more and more investor institutions now, and private capital investment grows rapidly, and investment professionalism also increased significantly. With the increase of investment willingness in space. For example, previously, prospective investors may ask a lot of basic questions, but now they are often very well prepared and researched. In total, people who are engaged in investment are becoming more and more professional, not only those who have graduated from majored in economy, but also many PhDs. I think this is very good because it represents the technical development trend of the investment in this area. On the other hand, from the perspective of space companies, I think maybe it's not easy for investors to understand your business plan. A good-looking financial statistics data are more convincing because it will transfer a lot of confidence to the investor. So I think for new startups, the difficulty is to find the seed investment. But now their difficulties are much smaller than 5 years ago because investors know much more about space.
And that's an interesting difference that you point out where, maybe 10 years ago, most of the funding was big state-owned companies. And then the first generation of private investment, I guess, was mostly finance people. And now you're getting some private investment like VCs that are more like PhDs or more technical people or people who have a very specialized understanding of maybe 2 or 3 or 4 industries. And so they probably have a deeper understanding of the technology and maybe a more realistic understanding of how long it will take to make money or how long it will take to become mature, so that's a very important and interesting point. And I guess if you compare that to the fundraising situation in the US, you have a lot of VC funds that would be headed by some PhD in some very specific area. And so it makes a lot of sense that you'd be getting that in China now also. That's interesting. Well, thank you for those answers. So now going on to, again, more of the sort of industrial base and the number of satellites that we expect China to launch. So looking at Euroconsult's recent China space industry report, we compiled all the satellites that have been launched by China, and then we make forecasts looking at all of the constellations that are under planning, and then we say which ones are more and less likely. And so the numbers that we have, and this is only satellites launched to non-geostationary. So there's a few big geos per year, but if we're looking at just non-geostationary, we have less than 50 in 2015, and by 2025 we expect about 160 satellites from China. Most of these are going to be constellations, as we probably can all agree on, but they're going to be a very wide variety of applications. Some of the factors that would be influencing this, we mentioned them a moment ago, the National Development and Reform Commission adding satellite internet to the new infrastructures. That's led to a big increase in interest in building communication satellites, for example. So there's a lot of different things influencing how many satellites will be launched from China in the next few years. So understanding that each of your companies does a very different thing in terms of the value chain. Kevin's company will help get the satellites to orbit, whereas Donglu's company will build them, and Zhongxing's company will build some and also will operate some. So a lot of different things. But what do you see as, I guess, the biggest growth opportunity within this expected increase in the number of satellites to be launched? Or how do you see this evolving from the perspective of your company? So we can maybe start with Kevin, because I guess your answer is maybe the most logical, which is, I guess more satellites means more demand for launching. I get, but I'm sure you have a more interesting answer. So Kevin, do you have any thoughts on the biggest opportunity for LandSpace in this future Chinese satellite manufacturing and launch sector?
Okay, thanks for your question, Blaine. So as you already introduced, there will be an explosive demand from the constellation launch, let's say. And as you already briefed that, it seems that in the next few years, especially in the next 3 years, there will be many, let's say, a lot of satellites going into orbit to form a constellation, no matter it is communication one or remote sensing Earth observation one. But anyway, in a word, many. So LandSpace right now is just targeting, let's say, tapping the target of the large demand for the satellites constellation launch demand, let's say. So right now we feel quite lucky that we made a quite let's say forward-looking and a really future perspective decision at the beginning when we decided to develop the Q2, the medium scale launcher, and based on which that will allow us to develop even bigger scale, let's say the heavy launchers as well, which is quite beneficial for the large scale satellite constellation orbital deployment. From the point of view of the let's say the next 2 years, I guess. So today, our topic is that are we really reaching a turning point for let's say for the market and for the space commercial space community? My point of view is that we are right now still let's say on the way right now, on the way of storing all of these power, all of these let's say from the market and also from the I mean not only from the manufacturer, the launch demand, but also for the application. So it's a kind of storage of let's say of the power. I mean the space. I mean the space applications, and also anyway the whole space commercial space market. So what I can say is that not only the launcher companies, but also the satellites and the application markets, we're all trying to, let's say, to reaching that point that is so it's kind of like a threshold. So once we break through, and then there will be a quite prosperous development of the application, which will lead to the, let's say, the large demand of the satellite manufacturer, and which is right now already on the way, let's say, from what we can see right now from all of these private satellite companies, but also the state-owned companies. What they are doing right now is just they were staying every muscle of them to, let's say, to get the capability for the batch design and batch manufacture of the satellites, but also, I mean, also for the launcher companies and for the launch services, and also some other related services like the TT&C and also the long-term O&M, operation and maintenance field, let's say. So from my point of view, we are right now still in at a stage of restoring all of this power and waiting for, let's say, the threshold which will let out all of these energy and power to reaching the turning point. So that's my point of view, Blaine.
Okay, so not quite at a turning point, but almost to a turning point, something like that. Okay, so Zhong, I understand that Charming Globe, you manufacture Earth observation satellites then you also operate Earth observation satellites. So it would be interesting to understand when looking at the future demand for satellites from China, do you see very much of an opportunity in selling satellites to other companies that might want to buy your satellites, or are you really only focusing on selling the Earth observation data and the sort of the services that are coming from the satellites that CGSTL is operating?
Okay, this is a very good question. Firstly, our space information business depends on the prosperity of the service ecosystem, which depends on the increase in the number of satellites and application companies, even from our competitors. This will make the market larger and larger. If you are well prepared, you can get more benefits. So I think we will have a lot of opportunities from downstreaming driven from the application market. In fact, our income from imagery and information part increased very fast every year. Secondly, as a whole industry chain company, we are naturally capable of serving the whole industry chain. Satellite manufacturing is also a very important business for us. Compared to data service, obviously, satellite manufacturing can recover money quickly. So we also attach great importance to customized satellite services. So far, we have launched 3 custom-built satellites, all of which have been successful and highly rated by users, with 2 more satellites are under developing. Thirdly, beyond the satellite's R&D capability, CGSTL also has excellent capabilities on satellites ground segment developing, from mission planning system to image processing and application system. So we can provide any service to meet customers. We have had some contracts on in-orbit satellite hosting and image processing services. So the challenge is, at present, customers always have very high expectations for low cost and production speed. This brings challenges for every satellite manufacturer. I believe that rapid batch manufacturing must be based on adequate validation, requiring the customer and the manufacturing side to work together, or the manufacturer to have a deep understanding of satellite operations. In my opinion, first of all, the biggest opportunity comes from the experiences of constellation built by ourselves. Secondly, in terms of customer demand for satellite manufacturing, we should have more opportunities because we already have more than 400 engineers, enough production capacity, and enough large factories, and did a lot of technical improvements to short the period from design to delivery. Besides, we are planning to reform our production line to adapt big constellation construction. These are constructive to customers. But it's hard to predict how many satellite contracts we will get. Therefore, in our marketing, we are maintaining the diversity of products and services and maintaining cooperation with the whole industry chain. So in any case, we will benefit from the rapidly growing demand for satellites. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Donglu, similar question for you, I guess. So Commsat, I mean, you have your plans to build lots of satellites for customers, but then you also operate your own satellites, providing different services. So can you give a little bit of insight about how Commsat sees these 2 different markets and what you see as the bigger opportunity for Commsat?
Thank you, Blake. Of course, I agree with your concern that the telecom, or let's say satellite internet, will standing on the top spot for the at least next 5 years. But for satellite internet, we Commsat now focusing on the satellite manufacture for our customers, because we believe this industry has a long-term development. Like, for example, for the first 3 to 5 years, the focus will be on the manufacture. For example, for mass production, for better satellite design, for better R&D for the future satellites. And after 3 to 5 years, the user equipment, or let's say the terminal, will stand out of the market and will create a mass market for many industries or even individuals. And then the data-driven economy will develop based on the amount of the devices and data. So currently, we are now focusing on manufacturing, but we believe the growing of this broadband satcom in China and also in a global wise will not only benefit the satcom company, because the whole, for example, the EO company will benefit it because of the supply chain will become cheaper. They can provide a cheaper equipment or devices to different type of satellites. And also in terms of the communication, because communication will provide a basic infrastructure for all type of, let's say, space applications for in different area and different regions. So just start from that, I believe the whole industry, the whole space industry will benefit from the satellite internet in the next 5 years.
Thank you. And so being mindful of time, we will try to keep our conversation on export markets a little bit short, just because we're already nearly getting to the hour, but it's an important topic. So, we've seen more emphasis from China trying to export a variety of products to many different places over the last 5, 10, 15 years. The Belt and Road Initiative has been a major project, and a lot of space companies are doing different deals that are related to Belt and Road. We see on this map from Euroconsult, for example, there have been a fairly large number of launch exports from China. So when thinking about the Chinese market versus the international market, how does your company view the international market? I mean, is it an opportunity that you're trying to address right now, or is it something that you see in the future, or is it not really a market that you find very attractive for your company? So maybe we can start with Donglu, and again, we can try to be mindful of time by keeping it a little bit short if we can. But
okay, thank you, Blake. Actually, technically, I propose that China is also one of the biggest international markets. So from the map you provide, I believe most of the job have been done by the state-owned companies in China, and mostly about infrastructure, or let's say product provider. But for the application side, I believe the very limited business or trading have been done to the overseas market. So, but in terms of Commsat, we believe we are standing in China, and we are welcoming more international collaboration to satcom industry. For example, especially in this macro environment like COVID environment, because the deglobalization is becoming one of the topic in the societies. And in that case, we believe spacefaring countries begin to seek independent solution. That's how the satellite export becoming more difficult in my perspective. But on the other hand, the challenges exist because of the financial situation, so that the less developed countries will be less willingness or less capable to buy or to import satellite or infrastructure from China or from anywhere else. But we see, from this case, we see the trend of different type of business, that the transition may be changed from infrastructure exports to service providing. Because anyway, I believe our panelist has mentioned that before, that in any case, the service is needed, from communication, from Earth observation, from navigation, etc. So I believe there's always space for international collaboration. And for our case, we are welcoming international supply chain to work with us, and we can work as a gateway for everybody outside China, as a contact, as a gateway. Thank you for playing for that.
That's a good point about the difference between infrastructure and services. I think that's an important distinction. Yeah. Okay, so Kevin, any thoughts from you about the international markets for LandSpace?
Yeah, thank you. So for the international market access or approach, I guess LandSpace is amongst the earliest group of the Chinese private launcher companies that were targeting into the international market. Let's say, counting that we have already signed the launch service contract with Denmark's the Danish satellite firm Commsat, and some other let's say small and medium enterprises in the commercial space community in Europe, let's say. And right now we're also trying to tap the Southeast Asian market and also African and South American. So so that is to say, we have a general, let's say we were planning a bigger map of the international market development, but just due to this COVID-19 situation, many of these business development have, let's say, they've already been slowed down, let's say, just because of that. But anyway, we're still trying to let's say to get a bigger market in the internationally, and to stand a little bit, let's say, higher level of these space community, trying to get let's say kind of a collective, or maybe you can say a joint effort with the Chinese other Chinese private space companies to provide. We're trying to calling on some joint efforts from the Chinese commercial community to provide the package deal or the package solution to the international space market. So that is to say, we would like to call on the alliance, the space alliance, to get in the satellite, the application, and also the launch service into one package, so that we can improve our competitive in the international market, especially under the situation of COVID-19. So that is our let's say current my point of view, and also my future plan of what we're gonna do. That's it.
Thank you, Kevin. And Zhong, any information?
Okay, thank you. Let me make it short. For international markets, we are focusing on information services as well as satellite manufacturing and components business. We have had some success in both areas and have developed some agency companies. Although these are still a small percentage of our revenues, but I think the international part will be rapidly growth in the future, especially for the information services, because for information for in-orbit satellites, after all, are inherently providing global services. And for, in another hand, and for satellites and components manufacturing, we will actively participate in more and more overseas exhibitions to promote our product. And yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and moving on to our last topic. It's a pretty short topic, but an interesting one. So the role of big tech. And so we have seen over the last year or two, several of China's very large big tech firms, Tencent, Huawei, Alibaba, Bilibili, and others, have started to do more in space. And for some of our viewers who may not know, big tech companies in China are very, very big. They have a lot of venture capital funding. They have a lot of, well, funding probably is the most important thing. So when thinking about, you know, the companies that would come into the space industry as investors, big tech is an important topic. So my last question, and then we will turn it to the audience for any questions. What is your company's strategy about big tech in the space industry, and what do you think will be the impact? So maybe we can start with Xing and then work back back up to our other panelists. So, Zhong.
Okay, thank you, Blaine. Actually, we already have corporations with Alibaba, Huawei, and you just said Bilibili, and some other mainstream internet enterprises in China. And I think there will be more business with them. Although we are ourselves far from that big tech firms, but we believe we will be a real big tech firm in the future. Remote sensing data and space information services are still very new to many people. There are a lot of potential users even don't know how to use remote sensing data, don't know what the benefit is because there were not enough data resources. All the data was updated very slowly in the past time and cannot solve their problems. But when there are enough satellites with timely information, there will be a very broad market. Although there is no big tech firm enters the space industry directly, they also didn't deny the possibility. From my point of view, maybe entering this industry directly is not a good choice for them because a lot of new space firms are still in the trial and error stage. Time and money are both risks. For any company without any experience in space industry, keeping observing and then linking their business to the industry in some opportunity is a good choice. That means these big tech firms could find a proper position, maybe at the upstream or the downstream, instead of starting from the very beginning. So from our side, just as I said, for satellite remote sensing, although it has a very long history, the services are not good, and the market is still small. The main problem is due to the quality and the quantity of satellites. Satellites providing excellent data were too less. This market needs some chemical effects and being bigger. Of course, cooperation with big tech firms can accelerate this process. And that's what is happening now. Cooperation not only means investment relationships, but also technical developing and doing business together. This is more important for the sustainable development of the new space. Actually, the big tech firms have their own fields. Some business has already been related with satellites, but obviously they don't need to develop satellites themselves. So I think this will be decided by the big tech firms' expectations of the cost benefit. Of course, the time of developing is also a very important issue. And before we become a big tech firm, cooperation with them is a very good way for our growth. But if you want to have this cooperation be strong enough.
Thank you. And Kevin?
Okay. As Dr. Zhong already briefed that, let's say many downstream companies in this community, in the commercial space, has already considering going enter or getting more, let's say, getting nearer and nearer, and also trying to get entering in this big data or big tech, the big tech field. From my point of view, it's true that the downstream businesses like the satellites and the space application firms are more, let's say, it's easier for them to get access and to be involved, to get involved with the big tech fields. It's true. But also, I guess, for, let's say, for the launch services providers like LandSpace and other companies in this in the upstream of the community, there are also still some ways to get, let's say, to get involved in this big tech field in terms of getting some, let's say, kind of big tech applications into this business, into the process of our business. And also, there will be some way out for us to, let's say, to get, we can get some kind of license for the commercial space field. to get more, let's say, more to easier entering is this big tech field. For LandSpace, more specifically, we are right now trying to get the AI, the artificial intelligence technology, being applied into in the process of manufacture, the design, manufacture, and also especially for the mass production of the launchers, which will be ready and more beneficial for let's say the constellation orbital deployments. As demand for the large demand for the launchers. So within this philosophy, we are also trying to, let's say, get the big tech applied into the to the business, and also in another hand, or in another direction, let's say, we could also make use of these the connections and the business connections with the satellites and other downstream space companies, like the application big data applications, to get access and more easier for us to get access to the big tech field. But for let's say for being or to become a big tech firm, I guess for a launcher company, it's still a little bit, there were some difficulties and some barriers to pave the way to directly going into the big tech firms, to be among the big tech firms. But I guess by applying this, let's say, we can go easier and nearer.
Yeah, okay. And Zhong, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Blake. To make it short, I assume those big tech companies have gained attention to space and also have done research, or at least in developing research in this area. So eventually, I believe they will join the race to some extent. But according to the current development of the industry, I believe it is still a little bit immature for them to make a strong move at this stage.
Thank you. Okay, and with that, we're going to bring it back live. So thank you for everyone who has gotten to this point in the webinar. We hope it's been informative. We have a few more minutes for some questions and answers from our panelists in real time. We have one question in the queue, and don't forget, if you have a question, you can go to the Q&A at the bottom and ask a question. But in the meantime, the question that is currently in the queue from Mr. Greg Daffner, asking, given the US ITAR regulations, how can your companies sell satellites or launches to Western companies? How would you work around the ITAR regime? So we can start maybe with Donglu, and then we can go from there. I will mute myself, so go ahead, Dong.
Thank you, Blaine. I think Commsat is not going to, I mean, in the near term, Commsat is not going to sell satellite or launch service to overseas markets. So maybe the other panelists can answer this well.
Okay, Xing, do you have any thoughts on ITAR restrictions and whether that will be a challenge for CGSTL?
Okay, actually, I'm not know about this regulation very well, and for us now we are focused on imagery selling and also components and payloads. I think if the regulation is a problem, that will be a issue for our agencies or our government. So for our company, if there has some business we can do, we are always trying. We are just keep trying. But if we can't do this business due to the regulation, I think there may be some technical way to. I mean, I don't know because I know the ITAR. Sometimes that means some country abroad cannot sell in some products, including US components, to China. But if we using some domestic components instead of US, maybe we can satisfy the regulation, maybe.
Okay, and Kevin, do we have you on the line? And if so, do you have anything to add on ITAR? We may be having some difficulties with Kevin's audio. Kevin, if you come on the line and if you hear us, then you are welcome to speak about ITAR. In the meantime, I don't see any more questions. I would like to first remind all of our guests and audience members, we have our contact information of our fine panelists showing on the screen here in terms of email and also QR codes for those who are so inclined. If we have any more questions, you got about 15 seconds probably to submit them. And if not, I think we are just about reaching the end of this webinar. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you for the excellent panelists. Again, please reach out to us at email or QR code. And we hope to see you on the upcoming series of webinars from APSCC. I am very much looking forward to it, more than I would have ever thought I'd be looking forward to a webinar series. So looking forward to seeing you all then. I hope it's been a good session, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.